Welcome to this week's episode of Humans in 5.
Here in the Northern Hemisphere, as we creep further and further into winter, a few seasonal changes are obvious. The weather is colder, and importantly, our days are shorter. The sun rises later in the morning and sets earlier in the afternoon.
As our days begin to shorten, many of us transition from one form of time telling to another. In the summer, many regions use daylight savings time or summertime, but then revert back to standard time in the winter. This system is associated with our spring forward and fall back shift twice a year. The spring forward, earlier in the year, pushes back more of our daylight hours into the evening as our days get longer, while falling back shifts these daylight hours closer back to the morning as our days shorten.
There are a lot of stories around both the origins of this shift as well as its relative benefits and drawbacks. Many people suggest that this shift was designed to accommodate farmers, as livestock shift their daily patterns around seasonal changes. It turns out this just isn't true. For better or for worse, livestock can't tell the time and organize their activities around the sun rising and setting directly rather than by an arbitrary time on the clock.
Daylight savings time as we know it today was first proposed by William Willett, a British builder who lived in the late 1800s and early 1900s. The legend goes that Willett was out for a horse ride in the morning light and noticed that most people seemed to be staying in bed during those morning hours with their curtains drawn rather than enjoying the daylight hours.
It is worth noting that at the time in the UK, the sun rose at 3 a.m. and set at 9 p.m. Willett spent years lobbying British Parliament to enact a daylight savings measure, which would shift daylight to later in the day so that people could better enjoy natural light. Willett died in 1915, with his desired measure never being passed.
The first country to enact a daylight savings policy was Germany during World War I. This policy had nothing to do with daylight enjoyment and instead reflected economic goals, as this shift meant that less fuel was burned at night. Britain and other countries followed with such fuel-saving measures soon afterwards.
Daylight savings actually had quite a journey after this shift. In different parts of the world, it was cancelled, then reinstated, then cancelled, and in some cases, really exaggerated. For example, in World War II, the British adopted double summertime, doubling the seasonal shift in daylight hours to further save fuel costs.
These days, there are frequent debates about whether this change should be abolished, with some advocating for everyone to stick with daylight saving time year-round with no shift back to standard time, allowing for more evening light throughout the year. In this debate, one argument comes up again and again. It is lovely to have more light in the evening, and it does encourage us all to go out and enjoy the world more. But it is a real pain to get up in the dark every morning over and over again. This irritation with waking up in the dark comes out as a reason to keep the system as it is.
It turns out there is a mechanism in our bodies that might explain why we so dislike waking up in the dark. We all have a circadian rhythm, or an internal body clock that contributes to things like letting us know when to be hungry or when to go to bed. One mechanism that contributes to timing how we wake up is the cortisol awakening response, or the CAR response.
In this response, our bodies release cortisol, a hormone that, among other things, makes us feel alert when we're waking up. Our bodies are flooded with cortisol about 30 minutes after we wake up. But this response gets even stronger when we're exposed to light during this wake-up process. When we wake up and are exposed to darkness, the CAR response is lower, and our bodies take more time to deal with that wake-up process.
So, while there may be a reason why we feel a little sluggish getting up in the dark, that still doesn't solve the conundrum of whether or not to live with the daylight saving shift. We can't say that we really have an answer. One of us, Michelle, has lived without the shift, as the state of Queensland in Australia doesn't change their clocks.
I can't say I minded, as it didn't affect my life all that much. Recently, the province of Alberta in Canada voted down living in only daylight savings time, so the argument will surely rage on in different parts of the world.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Humans in 5.
And don't forget to subscribe.